Pilot has put on your fasten the seatbelt sign. Please put on your seatbelts. This may be a little bumpy ride, because we're going to dig deep into this passage from Mark. Open up your bulletins to page 8. It's so much better in the Greek, and there's so many cool things that Jesus is telling us that are so important. Let's dive. Jesus and his disciples passed through Galilee, and he didn't want anyone to know it. Well, that's nice of you, Jesus. Why? For he was teaching his disciples. We're in the 9th chapter of Mark, right? Before this, there was a huge exorcism story. Great crowds were following. Jesus literally was like, I can't do all that right now because I got to focus on you 12. There's something that you're all not getting that I got to make sure you get. This whole passage is Jesus teaching, right? What does he teach them? The Son of Man is to be betrayed into human hands. They will kill him. 3 days after being killed, he will rise again. They didn't understand. But if you notice in the passage, and you heard it, what were they actually arguing about after Jesus told them that? Who was the greatest? How did they jump from the Son of Man is going to be betrayed and killed and rise to who's the best among us? Or even in the Greek, what is greatness? Remember, first century Jewish mind. You got to get yourself into first century Jewish mind. They would have been tipped off and went to a whole different ballgame when he first said, the Son of Man. That gets past us. It wouldn't have got past first century ears. The Son of Man was literally a prophecy from the book of Daniel. The Son of Man would be given all power and all authority by the one who sits upon his throne. The Messiah, the Son of Man, will be authoritative power, and the only thing that they knew was authoritative power was the empire that was around them. Not only the Romans, but first century Jewish mind, all of the great kings of Israel. Did you ever read the kings of Israel, by the way? Who was the best king of Israel? David. David was kind of a slime bag, right? Did you ever read the story about David? Oh, we only think of David as the guy who wrote the Psalms, right? The great king of Israel. David lusted after another man's wife. He had that man put on the front battle line so that guy could get killed so he could take the wife. And that was the good one. So what they understood about kingship was very much empire-driven. A king would be an authoritative power. All things would be under the king's feet. When the Messiah would come, the Messiah would be this reigning warrior monarch. He would come into Jerusalem. He would wipe out the Gentiles. The Davidic king would be restored, and it would just be like all these other kings. That's what greatness is. Greatness is that kingship. And all of a sudden, Jesus says, I'm going to be betrayed and killed. Huh? Let alone that whole rise again on the third day, because that was way out of their mindset. What do you mean you're going to be betrayed and killed? Greatness is about having this power. You're not going to die. Greatness is about being this king. So really what they were arguing about is, what is greatness? I'm so happy now in the church we never argue about that. We have it all sewn up. Sometimes we automatically go to the stereotype of empire and kingship, right? We think of horrible dictators or unrighteous kings or all these wicked people. Sometimes we transfer that into the economy too, right? So we think of powerful CEOs who are just making money over the little guy, and we think that's the problem. We Christians have kingship and empire woven into our hearts in different ways. When I was at General Convention, I was quite taken back as people were coming up to the microphone all the time, giving various argumentations. Normally when you read the great councils of the church at conventions, it's focused on theology. It's driven by theology, and it's driven by the good of the whole church. I literally was sitting at the table marking off as people were coming up how many times the word I was used. I feel, I believe, I want. I. Little tag team sermon. Father Kevin talked about a little song he likes to sing all the time. In the key of G.
I. Myself, me.
That's impressive.
And you can change in keys too.
This understanding of I, being a very consumer, convenient culture that we are in, prevails Christians to the point where our I trumps everything. I want it this way. I want it that way. Just look at social media for about a half a second and how we make the I the center of reality. Who would have thought we would live in a time where the most important pictures would be what we're eating? Right? Look at this wonderful meal, or this great party that we're at, or this great time with friends. Look at me. My favorite is when I see parents, no one from here, when I see parents put on Facebook birthday messages for their 1-year-old or 2-year-old. Mommy and Daddy love you so much. You have brought so much joy to our life. Just thank you for being it. And I always want to say, does your kid have a cell phone? Better that, does your 1-year-old read? Why are we putting that on there then? So that people focus on me. So we can talk about other people being empire, but boy, is empire woven into our hearts. We do it with the faith. We'll leave a church because father or mother said this or that, or they didn't sing my favorite song, or I didn't like the way that worship was. My favorite response back was, that's good because we're not worshiping you. I'm worshiping Jesus. What does Jesus tell his disciples? Go back to your page. He sat down and called the 12. Now that's kind of bizarre because he's talking to the 12. He's talking to them about everything that that I just talked about. All this understanding of greatness. They're having a conversation, and all of a sudden Mark says, and this is actually very funny, he says that Jesus sat down and called them. Where did he call them to? He was sitting right there. This is where the Greek gets funny. The Greek word is phoneo, which literally is the noise a rooster makes. I.e., Jesus was giving them a wake-up call. Jesus was alerting them to a brand new dawning of a brand new day. This is not going to be like empire as you all know it. Do you want to know what greatness is? Let me tell you. And what does Jesus say? He took a little child. The Greek word is paidion. All you Star Wars fans, the Padawan learners, it comes from this, right? Paidion, right? It could literally mean an infant to like a toddler, depending on the context. Jesus grabs a little child in his arms and says, whoever welcomes this little child welcomes me. It probably was an infant then, as he's holding a child. Whoever welcomes this child welcomes me. This is where English gets even worse. If I say to you, what is your definition of welcome? What do you say? What does welcome mean? What do you do when you welcome somebody? You bring them in, you greet them, make them feel comfortable, accepted. Normally, though, welcome is a one and done. You welcome someone into your greeter. You welcome someone into church. You welcome someone into a party. That's actually not what Jesus uses. Jesus uses the word dexteri. Whoever dexteris, hands, literally grasps, embraces, holds on to. This little child holds on to me. What's the metaphor that Jesus is using? Literally, the child is one of the most vulnerable and weakest things of our culture, right? Children can't feed themselves. Children can't clothe themselves. Children can't talk, normally if they're before the certain age. They are the most vulnerable in our society. You want to be great? You want to understand what greatness is? Hold on to the most vulnerable. Hold on to the most vulnerable. It's about ministry, folks. It's about ministry. When you are baptized into this water, you are called to be a servant of everyone. I wonder what our church and our country and our world would look like if Christians stopped using the word I. Ooh, wouldn't that be amazing? I wonder what our country and our church and our world would look like if we actually held on in our lives to the most vulnerable among us. if we held close and protected those weakest. I wonder how things would be different if we all stopped trying to be kings of Israel. Mother Teresa used to go into the streets of Calcutta, literally into garbage dumps and dumpsters and ditches where there was mud, and she would be finding all kinds of homeless people who literally had no one, who were literally physically dying in gutters. She would sometimes, because she would get there as they were dying and just held them until they took their final breath. Sometimes she would take them, covered in their own stuff, in their own feces, in the mud, back to the convents to wash them and give them a noble death. Sounds like a fun job, doesn't it? Yet she was always filled with joy. Always filled with joy. And people kept asking her, how are you so happy? You're literally holding dead people all day who have no one, who smell and are dirty and they're covered in their own stuff. She said 2 reasons. Because when I hold them, I'm holding Jesus. And that's what I'm called to do. When I hold that person and I embrace the most vulnerable, I'm holding our Lord. Joy is J-O-Y. J-O-Y. And she said the J stood for Jesus, the O stood for others, and the Y then stands for you. And you will have joy in your life when your life is lined up that way, with Jesus first, and then others, and then you. J-O-Y. But so often in our lives, we put the Y first. And sometimes we even treat our God as if he deserves to be serving us. Right? We treat God like a spiritual ATM. We don't come to church, we don't read our Bible, we don't come to Eucharist, but man, a crisis hits in our life. God, fix it. Why did you do this to me? Fix it now. Look at James. Go to the letter of James. Go to the letter of James. And right in the middle. Those conflicts and disputes, those who are fighting over greatness, where do they come from? Don't they come from your cravings that are at war within you? Empire fighting kingdom? You want something and don't have it, so you commit murder. You covet something and can't obtain it, so you engage in fights. You ask and don't receive, because you ask wrongly in order to spend on what you get on your own pleasures. Woo! James is a little cranky. So what does it mean for all of us? We don't read these gospel passages just so we have a history lesson, because the Word of God is alive, which means Jesus is teaching the church now. Jesus is teaching the church now. What is the greatest in your heart? Is it Jesus other than you, or is it just you? How is the word I in your vocabulary? Is it a lot? Is it not at all? I know it's not Lent, but maybe we should all fast this week from the word I. Ooh. Who are the most vulnerable that you're embracing? Newsflash, writing a check to a charity isn't embracing. Oh, that's easy. Because it's welcoming, right? One and done. Jesus is actually asking us to embrace. Who are the vulnerable you're embracing? Who are the weak that you're embracing? How are you spending your time, and where is your joy coming from? And I can assure you, if you put your life back in that order, where it's God and then others' needs and then yours in that order, you will experience a joy that you have never had. Why? Because you will be fully human again. Empire makes us less human. When we hold on to the fear and the scarcity and division, we become less human. But when we live the way that Jesus has programmed us to live. Michael Curry said, Jesus came to turn the world upside down so that we could see it right side up. He came to show us that empire isn't reality, but it's kingdom. This is true life. And true life is your joy will come when you actually embrace the most vulnerable and get rid of the word I from your vocabulary. Who is king in your life? Is it you or is it Jesus?